I welcome back Greater Heartland region. We are continuing on with Ignite, sparking your career. And we are here for session 4, defining your values. So glad that you came back to commit to your business and commit to your big life. I am stoked to have an amazing instructor here with us today, Dan Holt. Welcome. Dan, introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, Clark. As he said, my name is Dan Holt. I'm the operating principal in Springfield, Missouri. I also co-own a mega team with Jen Davis, and this year we're slated to sell about 850 homes. And I'll tell you, I'm really excited to get to share this part of Ignite, sharing your value, right? Sharing your value proposition. Why do people want to work with you? So I'm excited to get to share this today.
Yeah, this is something that we've already got a lot of feedback on of how do I build my validity starting in this business, right? What do I have to offer? And so the first 3 sessions we talked about KW value and so much others. Well, now we get to bring it together and you're going to have a deliverable on a value proposition. So really excited about this. So Dan, I'm ready to jump in if you are.
I'm ready to go. Let's get going. Right. Okay, so we are obviously, as Clark said, we're in session 4 of Skills to Spark a Great Career and Ignite. Ignite's taken several evolutions, and it continues to get better and better. So one of the most important parts of being in the industry, or even being an agent, is being able to differentiate yourself from other people. So the plan today is to design your value proposition. So we're going to go through that all the way start to finish. Interesting. It's kind of, I like to think of like, what's your elevator pitch? What is it that you genuinely believe differentiate yourself from other agents, right? I think in my board, I think we're pushing 2,400 agents, right? So buyers and sellers have the ability to select from a lot of different people. What differentiates me? What makes me better? And why do I think that buyers and or sellers should work with me? So today we're going to discuss how to clearly define your own value proposition and uncovering what makes you uniquely qualified to meet customers' needs. And before we get on that, session 1, 2, and 3, you talked about your success system. So I want you to throw in the chat, and Clark will do answering. Number 1, what are some challenges that you encountered in the previous sessions? And then number 2, was everyone able to meet with their accountability partner? And what are your ahas from working with an accountability? We know that things move further, move faster. Number 1, when your goals are written, and number 2, when you layer accountability to it. I think, matter of fact, I'm going to make this up, and most statistics are 63% of goals become successful when simply you write them down. So take some time, throw in chat. Clark will answer those as I move on, and we're going to continue going. So for today's agenda, by the end of the day, you will be equipped to, number 1, define the meaning of a value proposition. Number 2, explain the benefits of creating a personalized value proposition. And number 3, describe what buyers and sellers value most in their real estate experience. So thinking of that for just a little bit, what I want to do is we're going to break for about 3 minutes. And what I want to know is, what are your goals for today? What do you want to learn today? And what questions do you have?
All right, that's awesome. So we're going to jump right into our first activity. Yeah, Dan, thanks. So this is always a great piece here. You showed up today. Maybe you're just going along with Ignite, but yeah, in that value proposition, what do you hope to have answered? What do you hope to add in your validity? So yeah, partner up. If you're in your market center, right? Because this is a unique delivery of Ignite. You might be in your market centers, hopefully, and doing this together. And so if there's a facilitator there to help guide that, great. And if you happen just to be just amongst agents, partner up together and say what you'd like to learn. If you're watching this by yourself, right, at home, or maybe family in the background, take time, pause here, yes, for 3 minutes, and say, okay, what do I hope to get out of it? What do I want to learn? What questions do I have about this value proposition? We'll be right back.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you were able to articulate what some of your goals are from today's session. So first, let's begin by understanding what a value proposition is. So first, it is a unique, memorable, and persuasive statement that expresses the true value of working with you. You can see it on the slide right there. Number two, it addresses the specific and special needs of the buyer and seller in your market. And I will also add into the market of today because the market's changing all the time. Number three, states what you will do for your client to earn your commission and holds you accountable to high standards. By the way, when you say what your standards are to a buyer or seller, they will hold you accountable to those standards. So as you're thinking of this, refer to the Y4C2Ts and be able to articulate that within. So keep it in mind, it's unique, it's memorable, and it's persuasive. Okay, we're going to define that a little further. You're going to work through some exercises in just a little bit. They're going to help you go through these steps and we'll articulate it. But that is the definition of a value proposition. And I think, Clark, we have a slide on the next page. This is specifically from the MREA. And it says, top agents can easily explain what services they provide to anybody who hires them. I used the term earlier, an elevator pitch. And it doesn't mean because of physically where you are. I think it infers to the duration of time that you have. Can you, within a minute or two, articulate your value proposition? Number one, can you tell them why it's unique? Can it be memorable? Can it meet their specific needs? And does it also say what you will do for them? And does it hold you to a high level of standards?
Yeah, Dan, I was going to add on to this and think through like, why is it so important, like to kind of define this value proposition? Think about the products and services that you buy, right? Like what first captured in of you handing over your dollars, making a vote with your dollars to pay for that service or pay for that product. I'm sure there's a clearly defined message, right?
You know what's interesting too, Clark? Is it memorable? Like, is it catchy? Like, why do slogans work sometimes? Some businesses, like we can think of certain businesses and what their slogans are and what they say that's catchy. And typically, we're going to talk about this in a little bit in an activity. Does it clearly state also, even though being catchy and cute, right? Is it memorable? So thinking about memorable, it can even be that simple. Yeah. Like by the way, my team has never gone for this. My last name is Holt. I think a household name is really right. And that's a slogan. That's not necessarily a value proposition. They won't let me work that in though. So I don't know why.
I love it, man. You should have won that one. Yeah.
Okay. So the benefits of a value proposition, and I'm going to articulate this a little bit more in depth and kind of going further because I don't want to miss any points on this. But number one, it helps your clients understand your value and expertise. So your value proposition will say that, by the way, your value proposition is all about you, right? So this is why you are different and what differentiates this. So not everyone knows why they should even hire an agent in the first place to help with the real estate needs. So sharing your value proposition with clients helps provide them an opportunity to see how working with you can make their real estate experience better. Number two, it protects your commission. I wouldn't just go into your value proposition saying you're going to protect your commission, and yet it's value. Your value proposition helps you stand out from the competition and helps your clients understand what they're paying for and why they should pay you. I added that last part because, right, we're competing sometimes. And number three, build strong and trusting relationships. One of our business as realtors is to build strong relationships. Number two, I will add this, it's to maintain strong relationships. We don't always know when somebody's going to buy or sell. Further classes are going to help you uncover motivation and timeline, but building strong relationships and maintaining strong relationships. Your value proposition is your promise to your client. By keeping your word when working with them, you can earn their trust. So it can be that simple. So in your value proposition, does it clearly articulate, number one, why they should use you, why they should pay for you, and number three, what the long-term relationship's going to be of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break for 5 minutes. We're going to look at some examples of value propositions. And I think there's 6 or 7 of them right in front of us. We're going to break into small groups for about 5 minutes, work together, read these, articulate, and see, do they meet the criteria that we established before, and have a dialogue in your groups about that. All right. So hopefully during that conversation, you're able to establish a handful of things. Number one, in talking about the company's value propositions, right? And in these companies, obviously, we're looking at their names. These are really large companies. They spend a lot of money, time, and resources discovering what their value proposition is and how to articulate it. So here's a handful of things to think about, even as we go along and as you develop your own value proposition. Number one, value proposition examples are written in client-centered language. So it's about you, but it's what's in it for the client. Number two, value proposition examples pose a challenge along with the solution. And if you look at the examples we just went through, they do that. And number 3, value proposition examples explain either directly or indirectly through implication why you are different than the competition. Number 1, I'm sorry, shouldn't say number 1, but I'll say this. We're clearly not saying anything about other agents, but what we're saying is something that differentiates us, something that sets us apart. So moving on, we're talking about connecting to your value and in your participant guide. So far, we've discussed your value proposition. We've talked about other companies' value proposition and how to enhance that. So here's some questions I want you to think about rhetorically, and you can also write down some notes on this. You see the notes here, the KW Market Center value, your fiduciary, and your market expert, or your market expertise, or your market knowledge. So here's a question. How does being a part of Keller Williams family bolster your personal value proposition? Here's an example. You're now part of the largest real estate company under one brand, nearing over 180,000 and pushing 200,000 all the time. Number 2, how does your value proposition relate to serving as a fiduciary for the clients? Can they read and articulate, or when you verbalize it, can they articulate that you have their best interest in mind? You're not tied to the outcome and you're working for them. And number 3, how does being a market expert add to your value proposition? How can you articulate that? How do they know that you're the market expert or the local real estate market economy specialist of choice? We're going to work through these exercises in a little bit. Here's some examples of some other things that might attribute to your specific market. Number 1, here's an example, right? Are you bilingual? Could that be valuable to people who maybe don't have English as their first example? Have you worked in sales in the past? Number 3, did you grow up in a real estate family? Number 4, do you have a degree in finance, accounting, business, real estate? Now, if you don't have any of those 4, don't sweat it. You can help articulate this through other things you've done. You are where you are because of all the experiences that you've had in life. There is something that you can add to this. And if you don't know of any personal experience that you've had in the past that may help with this, utilize your market center's experience, your market center's numbers, your market center's sales numbers, etc. You can add to your value proposition by who you brand with.
Yeah, Dan, I was going to add to there, right? As another example, coming out of education, I was an educator for 10 years prior to getting into real estate. So something I poured blood, sweat, and tears into. It was a big part of my life, and I enjoyed. So part of my value proposition became to educate the buyers and sellers in this current market, right? And to be along with them in that journey and their understanding of what is important to them in that process, and putting them on a path, which I did with my students, right? For 10 years. So taking that, because it was important to me, I was able to lean in on that and to communicate in my value proposition.
Yeah, and even adding to that, we all have previous experiences that will add to our real estate businesses. And I say, even if you didn't have a job before, did you play on a team? Were you in debate? Were you in, and all these things, all these experiences can add up to increasing your value proposition as an agent. When we looked at the examples of connecting your value, here's a couple examples, specifically with the KW and Market Center value. Here's an example of a sentence they wrote in the book. Number 1, I have access to the collective knowledge and experience of nearly 200,000 agents worldwide. You can also add to that to a networking, right? You can change some simple words, or a referral group of 200,000 agents worldwide, or use your market center size. There's 100 agents in my market. There's 400 agents in my market, etc. However, fiduciary, I can point you to reputable resources to determine the best. This says school districts or for your kids. Utilize however that works for you in that case. By the way, you can alter this. This doesn't have to be like you write it one time and it stands forever. Use this as a fiduciary as what you've determined is important for them. So you can point them towards reputable resources, determine what area of town is closest to where they're going to work, or etc. And also being the market expert. Clearly, we all, I hope, have access to MLS at this point in time. Some of us may not because we may be coming in newer, and some of us had it for a long time. So how can you effectively help them price their home to get them the most amount of money and the time frame that's applicable to them, or the time frame that's applicable to help them meet their real estate goals? And you can alter that whether they're buying or selling.
Yeah, Dan, I was going to add one note there. KDB market center value, also knowing, as a lot of our offices, we have strong market share, right? Being able to say, hey, we're the number one selling office in our market area, or we, out of X amount of transactions, we've closed such percentage or this many transactions. Like, yeah, lean on the success of the company and local company that you've aligned with. Love that.
That's right. You know, it's interesting too. When I look at my value proposition, I like to think of it like this. And after this, we're going to take a couple minutes just to write down our ahas from this section so far. But this is kind of how I see it. And we're in a very naturally competitive industry, right? Like, everybody knows a realtor. Everybody probably knows two or three, in all fairness. And so I think of it like this. If I were standing side by side with all three competing at one time, right? And the seller or the buyer was asking, why should I pick you? Can you articulate it that well so that if that was your only interview period, was your elevator pitch, for lack of better terms, or your value proposition, as we should probably more professionally call it, can I articulate it that fast? And why is it important to them?
Yeah, Dan, that's really good, because what you also focus, what you said it earlier, that, man, that's a big aha for me. It's not about bashing the other agent or pointing out their flaws, because that's a really good image. I'm going to stick with that, because if you have three agents that are lined up speaking to Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you focus on them, all of a sudden if you're on your competitors, you take the focus off the client, right? And you're not going to know what they want, which they want to be able to connect and know how you can directly speak in their situation and get them to where they want to go.
Well, I'll tell you, Clark, that's kind of from first experience. And obviously, we know that the most empowered person is the one who comes to the answers by themselves. So does your value proposition almost formulate, does it cause them to think, right? Going to your point also, we compete a lot in our market for clients and for buyers and for sellers, sometimes on listing appointments, sometimes on others. Here's what I will tell you. Most agents do make it all about them. This portion is somewhat about us because we're talking about our experience, but it's really what's in it for them. Why is that important? And by knowing them, by asking questions, you can articulate this to fit your clients as a whole or even specifically. So let's do this. Let's take a couple minutes and let's just write down what's important about this. How are you seeing the importance of a value proposition in your business, and how can you see that having a direct impact in your business? All right. So if you recall from the beginning of the class, we talked about your value proposition. And step 2 was, well, actually, what was step 2? I'm sorry. Step 2 was addressing the specific needs of buyers and sellers in your market. So when we talk about that, right now we are on what matters most to buyers and sellers. And so we have a lot of slides we're going to go through. So, and Clark, ask Clark to stay on this one with me because this is very interactive. We want to keep the energy up. We know that everybody's watching video and sometimes that can be a challenge one, but there is so much content in the next handful of slides. But what we want to do is we really want to talk about, number one, what's really important for buyers and sellers. We're going to talk about some stats, even from the National Association of Realtors, but just kind of getting an understanding of this. So on the next slide, it talks about the purpose of real estate. We're going to break this down both on the buy side and the sell side. And I know you could read, and we're going to go along and just go through this. So number one, the purpose of real estate. For buyers, their goal is to find just the right home at just the right price and just the right time with the least number of problems. You're going to see that be consistent. And we're going to talk about that in later slides within Ignite, specifically when we talk about like contract to close and et cetera like that. And for sellers, their goal is to net the most amount of money and the shortest amount of time with the least amount of problems. A couple things that are consistent about here. Number one, they both talk about money, they both talk about time, and they all talk about little problems. You just need to flip the hat which you're wearing at each time. But right, isn't that true? Like buyers always want a deal. Sellers always want the most amount of money as possible. They all have a time frame in mind. And by the way, they both say the shortest amount of time, right? Do we ever have sellers or buyers that aren't the most patient?
Yeah, absolutely.
And these can be some of the issues. And then lastly, with the least amount of problems, right? Like, let's not make it personal. Let's make it about the transaction and about the buyers and the sellers. So by the way, those are both in the MREA. Both those lines are page 94. And let's just, Clark, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, well, it brings back to the necessity of understanding your fiduciary roles, right? If this is a simple goals of a buyer and a seller, right? They can be seen as competing against one another, and yet great agents understand the fiduciary roles and be able to meet the win-win for both the buyer and sellers. So being a fiduciary and be able to communicate that on the onset of it's as simple, having the structure here is as simple as that, right? Just helping them become aware, even if they're not aware of that, will set yourself apart of bringing that simplicity in the transaction.
Well, and if I could add a little bit to this, and I'm not going to contradict the quote, and yet, like when we look at sellers, their goal is to net the most amount of money. I would add a paraphrase and say, in the market we're in today. Now that last part can apply to any market, right? And yet every market is different. And in the shortest amount of time, I would ask questions because the shortest amount of time could be a different definition to every seller. Some might be 1 day, some might be 30 days. And to them, that might always mean the shortest amount of time. So I would say in the shortest amount of time, that helps them meet their goals. And I would add those lines to both paragraphs, actually.
Yeah, all about them. Back to
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the 10 service areas of the buyer value proposition. Number one, and hopefully we're always doing a buyer needs analysis. Number two, pre-qualification or pre-approval. Number three, neighborhood information. By this time in the process, after you've done a proper needs analysis, we hope that you're either at some level able to narrow this down to geographic specific information. They care about home searches, making an offer, negotiating buying, vendor coordination, pre-close preparation, closing, and post-close preparation. I mean, we still have a fiduciary after post-closing. I guess I shouldn't use the word fiduciary. And yet, don't we have a responsibility to stay in communication with these people and providing them things such as vendor coordination? Do we ever have home buyers that want our help with painters or plumbers after closing?
Absolutely. Yeah. If we want to keep them as clients for life. Yeah.
That's right. And if we say we have vendor coordination, wouldn't it be great? Isn't that a great way to stay in contact with people even after closing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interestingly so, on the next slide, it's the top 10 service areas of the seller value proposition. Now, you'll notice not a lot of these are different. So number one, a needs analysis. Wow, that was also the same with buyers. Isn't it interesting? They're both needs analysis. It didn't say a listing presentation, actually said a needs analysis.
Yeah.
Number two, a pricing strategy. That kind of looked the same as what was on the buyers, didn't it? So we're being local economists of choice. Number three, property preparation, marketing strategy, receiving an offer, negotiating, selling, pre-close preparation, closing, and post-closing preparation. Don't overcomplicate that buyers and sellers are actually that different in what it is they're looking for. They actually want the same things.
Yeah. Yeah, Dan, I love that the needs analysis is at the top, right? I mean, it clearly understanding their motivation, their readiness, willingness, enableness to do
Enableness.
so, right? How they see that process. Yeah, it's a must.
And both of them also look for our pricing strategies, right? It's a little different on a seller and a buyer. On a seller, they're looking for pricing strategies. On a buyer, they're looking for what's the home worth. They're looking for our opinion of market valuation. They are leaning on us.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Okay, so next, over the next 4 slides, I think actually, we're going to talk about actual data from the National Association of Realtors. So in polling, and I don't even know how many people they polled, but let's just say there was 5 million homes that were sold, a little over 5 million homes sold in 2021. And so the National Association of Realtors does this same exercise every year. Here's what's really important is to understand what is important, what buyers want from their agents. Number one, help them find the right home and purchase. Sometimes we have a limiting belief that, well, buyers have all the information readily available in front of them anyhow, right? They all have access to the internet, we assume, and yet do they have relevant market information all the time?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, in being the professional of choice, right? So in our value proposition, if we state that what we're going to do is give them relevant market information all the times, it means that when we know they're A buyers, we're bringing them properties. We're not just being proactive and allowing them to pick properties for us to show. We're not just door openers, we're market specialists. Number two, help buyers negotiate terms of sale. Interesting, that's number two. We don't just have to let them take the lead. They're leaning on us to be the market experts. Number three, help with price negotiations. Kind of goes along with number two, but it's a little different. Number two is more terms of the sale. Number three is price negotiations. I will tell you this, in the market we're currently in, which is still in our market, a very strong seller's market, buyers are leaning on you to find out what terms will get them the home.
Yeah.
And it may not always be price.
It's changing fast too. I mean,
right, Clark, you've seen it. Sometimes terms win over price, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, as of this recording, not to say this is for your market, yet we're also now seeing some shifts in less offers and agents going into assuming and they prepared their buyers that, yeah, we need to really bring all that we can to make sure we get the home. Well, that might not be the case. Right. So being clearly aware of what is going on in the market is so important because it's changing weekly almost, it feels like.
Well, and I'm not doing fast math here, but that's essentially basically 75, 76% of the equation of what buyers want most from their agent. 76% of what they're wanting is helping finding the home, helping negotiating terms, and helping establish price.
Yep. Bingo.
Are they spending now all the rest of it, the other category, if you will, that's in gray, the 24%, they want help with paperwork, determining comparables, what comparable homes we're selling for. That could also be kind of incorporated above. Determining how much the buyer can afford. Some of that's going to be on the lender if they're getting finances. Help with arranging financing. That's ironic because that's next, right?
Yeah.
And helping teach the about the neighborhood, about the area, right? Being a kind of a geographic expert, what attractions are near them. And then there was essentially none else. Like the other 3%, helping them find renters for a property if it's an investment. So right, so it's assuming that not most of these are investment properties.
Right.
And then that kind of wraps up the most. Now, Clark, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Clark?
Well, I'll say this because, a little takeaway from this because we did share what that buyer process looks like. Those top 10 things that we do during the process, or what a good agent does for the buyer. That's your plan to success. And yeah, we need to keep this in mind, especially as we're communicating who we are and what we do for our buyers, right? What I took away from there, from what you said, like, okay, if only 4% are really concerned about how much they can afford, well, it doesn't say that it's not important. It's something we shouldn't visit in our business, right? You
Yeah.
as a professional know that it's a part of the process. That's in one of the 10. Yet, just being clearly aware of what the buyer expects and how you can educate them and take them through the process, that's where your value comes into it. It's still you want to understand what's about them, and these stats do help us to think, okay, in trends, these are what buyers are looking for. It is keeping it simple. That this is why they need you, right? Because they're unaware of what they possibly need in the transaction.
Well, and going back to the numbers, Clark, that's a great point in that helping them determine how much they can afford was 4%,
Mm-hmm.
and helping them arrange financing was 3%.
Yeah.
So a lender partner, remember, I talked about vendor coordination on the buyer. Like I said, when it said the top 10 service areas in a previous slide, top 10 service areas of the buyer value proposition, we can go back over here and we can look and say 7%. So we talked about vendor coordination, right?
Yeah.
And a lender can be a vendor.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
7% of what buyers want from their agent can be summarized into financing, potentially, right?
Yep.
Number one, can you arrange financing? Number two is the form of home affordable. 7% of this circle is complete by having a good lender-vendor relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Now, factors buyers value when choosing their agent. So the first one was what buyers want from their agent. This is factors buyers value when choosing the agent. So we'll move to these. This is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, the agent is honest and trustworthy. Now, I hope we all believe that we're honest and trustworthy. And how do we exude that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do we help them understand that? I'm going to give you an example from another class I teach, and it's called the trust triangle, right? And in the trust triangle, it talks about at the top. It talks about are you authentic? When people talk to you, do they know they're getting the real you?
Mm.
Are you an active listener? Are you right? And then the next is empathetic. Do they know that you care? So when they tell you what their concerns are, when you ask questions, number one, are you paying attention? Are you being the real you? Because right, people know when you're being fake, right? Or salesy. Do they know you care? Are they getting the real you? And then lastly, can you lead them to logic? Number one, do they know they're talking to the real you? Number two, do they know you care? And number three, can you lead them to logic? So when we talk about being trustworthy, I want you to see it that way. I don't want to see trust as do they believe they can leave their purse on the table and you not take it, right? I mean, I hope that should be a non-negotiable. And my point is, can you exude that? Number two, only 19% said they valued the agent's experience. What do we typically lead with first? I've sold 100 homes this year. I've sold 20 homes. I've sold whatever, right? And guess what? Only 19% of them care what your experience is. Yeah. Number three is reputation of the agent. By the way, if you don't nail number one on being honest and trustworthy, that directly correlates to your reputation on number three. Yeah. That's 44%. 50, let's just round up, right? Because let's use realtor math and let's round up. Every 44% is 50 in realtor math. 50% is, are you honest and trustworthy? Do you have experience? By the way, if you're newer and you don't feel you have experience, use the market center's experience.
Yep,
you can leverage experience on the and you have reputation. Do you have reputation of an agent? And if you don't feel you have that yet because you've been too short, use the reputation of Keller Williams in your local market. It is still applicable. So this doesn't all have to be about you. They can also be about the market center's value, right? Absolutely. And then going through the rest of the other category, which is our largest category. Well, yeah, it's our largest individual category on this, making it 44%. Listen, like this doesn't sound really challenging. Number one, the agent is friend or family member. Now you can't be everybody's family member, right? And yet are they your friend? Number two, agent's knowledge of the neighborhood. By the way, you can know all the information in the neighborhood with about 30 minutes study online, right? It's called a CMA. It's called Google search. It's called whatever. Agent has a caring personality and is a good active listener. That kind of tied back into the trust conversation we had, didn't it? Agent is timely in responses. If they ask you a question, get back as practically fast as possible. We do sadly live in a now society, right? And people want information right away. Agent seems 100% accessible because of the use of technology like a tablet or smartphone. By the way, that didn't say agent is 100% accessible. Clark, are there smart plans that make agents seem accessible 100% of the time, even though they're not accessible 100% of the time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes, you can be ever present.
That's right. And then the last ones, which are very low, is active and local community and volunteerism. That is important, and yet I wouldn't focus all your time on it. Number 2, agents association with a particular firm. Gosh, turned out it wasn't that big of a deal. Professional designations held by an agent. I'd be careful. By the way, I've been in this 13 years. I have no idea how many homes we've sold, and I have no professional designation other than realtor.
Yeah.
Okay, that's factors buyers value when. So we talked about what buyers want most from their agent, and number 2, what buyers value when choosing an agent. I'll tell you this: it doesn't change a whole lot when we transition to sellers, because we're talking about people and what attracts them to other people. Okay, and then what sellers? So same conversation. We're just talking about sellers now. Mm-hmm. So what sellers want most from their agent? So like I said, we've talked about buyers. Now we're transitioning to sellers. Number 1, and it's funny that it was more distinct on the buyers of what buyers wanted most from their agent. If you remember, the number 1 answer was 52%. This is a little bit smaller. So you're going to be a little bit more encompassing on this, and that's okay because we want to complete the circle. Number 1, they want help pricing their home competitively. That's 21%. That's really interesting. So we're talking about being the local economist of choice, right? And so when we're talking about that, don't fall under the false fact that everybody knows what they want for their home. Some of them just want to know what their home's worth. Now, they still might have an opinion what they want to sell it for. We run into that all the time because they all have access to the internet too, but they're looking to be led. Number 1, it's not necessarily what their home is worth, right? That's different. And I want you to see the difference in the verbiage. Some people say, what's my home worth? That's an arbitrary feeling almost. To me, it's more specifically, they want help pricing their home competitively. Now, when I say competitively, think of the market you're in today, not 6 months ago, today. That's 21%. 20% want help seller market home to potential buyers. Well, we all want to do that, right? One of the purposes of generating seller listing leads is to generate buyers for their property. They want to know that you have the marketing ability to market their home to potential buyers. Number 3, help sell the home within a specific time frame. You should be able to ascertain that from doing your CMA. At this price, it should sell within this amount of time. With this price, it should sell within this amount of time. Also, I would caution you, don't tell them what time frame you want to sell it in. Ask them what time frame they want to sell it in.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't make the assumption everybody wants to sell in one day with multiple offers. I hope they do, and they don't all. Let's see. And then number 4 is 16%. Help seller find ways to fix up home to sell it for more money. There are opportunities for us to pick out the obvious things that we know will make more money. Now, here's the interesting part. Help sell it for more. I don't often recommend people to make upgrades to their homes if it's just going to be a dollar for trade. But if they're going to do something that helps their home either sell faster or make an investment or make a return on that investment of the upgrade, I'm all in for that, right? I'll trade those dollars.
Yeah.
And then, interestingly so, other on this was 12%. Help find a buyer for home. Well, that kind of sounded like market home to potential buyers, but it's really different. Only 12% wanted the listing agent's help finding a buyer for the home. They understand we're marketing it to a bigger co-op group of agents. Only 6% wanted help with negotiating and dealing with buyers. Help with paperwork, inspections, preparing for settlement, 5%. Help sellers see homes available for purchase. That's only 1%.
Yeah.
And help create post videos to provide a tour of the home. That's only 1%. I see a lot of agents in the past have led with their value of, well, I'm going to take videos of your home and put it. That turns out that wasn't really important to most people.
No, absolutely not.
So once again, I think, what is it? Roughly 73% of this is answered in the top four. Price the home competitively, market to buyers, help sell the home in a specific time frame, and help them point out obvious things that you know. By the way, going back to what it said before, one of the value propositions for helping sellers is to help for a smooth transaction. Don't just think of things that are going to make the home look prettier. Think of things that you know as you walk through the home and see, are these going to be flags for an inspector, number one? And number two, are they potentially going to be flags for an appraiser?
That's good.
Keep it smooth.
That's right.
Clark, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would say, as we're again kind of revisiting this, bringing it back to, and we'll take a pause, but begin thinking through it. This one, these are very common themes we've seen throughout since NAR has done this. Not much has changed. Trust has always been a big piece here. Getting the most for your home, pricing that home competitively. Like, a lot hasn't changed. And yet begin to think through, okay, how can I begin to craft a value proposition around these? I'll say this, and then maybe we'll get to this at a later point, or this will be a trigger for it later for you. Yet even thinking through that one little sliver, let me just go back. There, help seller find ways to fix up their home and sell it for more. One, vendor relationships. Those are important. Who you're else in business with matters. But also think through what we talked through on session one. I know it was a lengthier session that we talked through, but there's a reason why we talk about Keller offers, Keller covered, Keller mortgage, right? Keller concierge. All these are tools, especially Keller concierge. Like, that's a tool, if it's in your area, that can easily fix a pain point and provide that value proposition. So again, there's a reason why we're leading all these into here, to build your ability and, of course, be able to communicate a value proposition.
That's right. So just like we did in the same format we did for buyers, we're also going to talk about factors sellers consider when choosing an agent, right? It doesn't say hiring. I want you to replace the word choosing with interviewing, because they may be interviewing several. Yeah, let's talk about that. Number one, at 32%, is the reputation of the agent. If you remember, it wasn't as high for buyers as the reputation of an agent. But number one is reputation of the agent. Number two, is the agent honest and trustworthy? That's almost 20%. Remember, we talked about that. That was the authenticity, sympathy, and logic. Do you listen? Do they know they're getting the real you? And can you help lead them to logic? Number three, agent is a friend or family member, 17%. 17% of the time, people want to do business with people they already know or they're related to.
Yeah, by default. Yep.
So, but an astounding, what is that, like 66%? No, I'm sorry, 56% of the decision is made on the reputation of the agent. Is the agent honest and trustworthy? Those two should tie together, right? And number three is the agent a friend or family member. 17% of the business are from people you already know, right? Or you're related to. And hopefully you know people you're related to.
Yeah, which may not be, I mean, when we think about the approach for sellers and typically how that listing agent is compensated, this kind of makes sense, right? It's a possibly larger commitment, and granted, we can argue who actually pays for the agent's commission, and yet it's a different approach with sellers. They definitely want to, that trust factor is even a higher piece there, for sure.
Exactly right. Yep. The other category on this is a little bit larger than the other ones we've seen in the previous 3 slides, but it's really interesting because some of these are so easily remedied if you don't. Like, for instance, I could come to your market, any market, and I could have agent knowledge of the neighborhood just with technology. If I have access to the MLS and I have access to Google, I can have knowledge of the neighborhood in 30 minutes, 15 minutes. I can know everything I want to know, right? And my point to that is, do your homework before you go. That's 11% of it, right? And you may not have all of these, right? But what we're trying to do is we're trying to stack you in a position so that you have as close to 100% every time as possible. Because if you have more of these things and the closer you get to 100%, consider this, that's a higher conversion rate on getting the listing. Number 2, agent has a caring personality and it's a good listener. Well, that's only 5%, but going up above, agent is honest and trustworthy was 19%. So if you can close that gap, that's 24%, right? And then agent's commission, guess what? That's only 4%. of what they use to consider when choosing an agent.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting part. Let's flip that around, Clark. 96% of sellers don't care what the agent charges.
I like that. Yep.
Okay.
Big awareness piece there. Yeah.
And then agents association with a particular firm. As long as you answer the other thing, 96% of them don't care, right? And then once again, like we saw with the buyers, agent seems 100% accessible because of the use of technology like a tablet or smartphone. And professional designations, once again, just didn't matter. Now, I'm not saying they don't matter, and I'm not saying don't do them. If you feel that's going to help put a tool belt or a tool in your tool belt that helps you with a higher level, I'm just saying sellers and buyers holistically didn't find a whole lot of value in that when considering which agent to hire.
Yep. But again, we get to dive into the needs analysis, right? You might find out that, helping fix the home, get ready to prepare for market is 100% what they're looking for in an agent.
That's right.
You won't know unless you have that needs, which don't worry, what's a needs analysis? I don't know what it is. We'll get to it in Ignite, right? That'll be a next later session. So
you know what's funny? A needs analysis is just a structured set of questions.
It is. It's a glorious part about it.
And I'm not going to steal anybody else's thunder. How about that?
You want to come back, don't you?
Yeah. Clark, I don't know that I can do this next section any justice with you being the Greater Heartland's regional technology trainer. But as you saw in the value of both buyers and sellers, it talked about the accessibility through technology and adding that to your value proposition. And Clark, I think I'd kind of like to punt this to you because you're the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and I'm glad that we led with that, right? Because we do want to understand what's important to our clients, and as the stats show us, and what you might actually encounter in your needs analysis or sitting down at the table with your clients, technology might not come up. However, this is intended to be a tool for you, knowing those importances from your agents, or from your clients and from the stats, right? How do you propel those? How do you heighten those and allow tech to work for you to deliver the pricing and to deliver the marketing, right? So it's not technology itself is at the top. Technology is an enhancement to those things that are important, right? So a few features that Command obviously provides for you and your clients. If you're not aware, then write these down and look and see how they can serve these purposes. Smart plans, right? You mentioned it before, Dan. Be able to track your contacts and your leads. So we'll be able to have a custom plan, that intelligence to kind of build those deeper relationships. Well, Smart Plans can let you do that. If you want to understand what that buyer or seller is looking for and be able to follow up with them with the appropriate time frame, the appropriate conversation, Smart Plans can allow that leverage for you. KW Consumer app, which we spoke about in session 1, that home search app that not only allows them to search for any home anywhere. There's a buyer and seller guide there that's really powerful, that you can take those 10 items of the buyer transaction, 10 steps of the seller transactions, and deliver them right there in the app. So when you have that meeting, that consultation at the table with them, you could use your app as not only a reference point, but also to revisit a later point. They could have your consultation in hand. And also saves agent sites. You have your own branded website, which allows, again, just like the app, to search any homes, has that guide in it as well. And yet, especially sellers and buyers, they want to be able to see the market and have it readily available to them. And you can do that through your app and, of course, your website. So, and thinking that through, well, how do I incorporate technology into your value proposition? We'll think through one way to propose this, right? With our innovative technology, my innovative technology at Keller Williams, I get to meet you where you are. And again, that could be delivered through the app. Have a presentation or about sellers, a listing presentation or buyer's consultation, and walk through the steps right there on the app. Maybe have a printout guide for those folks that would prefer to have that too. But know that you can also have it through the app. But bring it back to what's convenient for the buyer and seller. We're seeing, just like in any other industry, a convergence of services, right? The consumer wants the easiest path to get to where they want to go, least amount of hassle as possible. Talked about it earlier. Yes, we've seen in other industries, look at the travel agency industry. We're going to see that in real estate as well. Where's the one place that I have to go, not have to have all this information to get to where I want to go? So making convenient for the customer, for your client, is important. Your technology can easily do that. So again, was it on the surveys the most important for buyers and sellers? No, yet think through, as I develop my value proposition and I develop my skill set, how can I make it more convenient for my client to realize I'm delivering on what I said I'd deliver?
Well, and to your point, even some of the ones that were higher, like I know this is going to sound a little weird, a little, I don't want to conflict it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Neither is more important than the other. Some people just said one thing was more, it was the first thing they thought of. And so to your point, all we're doing is just trying to complete that circle and get as close to 100% as we can. The more times we get to 100%, the more clients we're going to convert.
Yeah, bingo.
The more, and we don't have to know it all. We also have to have the accessibility to it, right? So keep it in mind previously. So what we're going to do, again, in previous fashion, is we're going to go to ahas. Here's the deal. Don't use this time to catch up on your text messages and check your emails, right? I may have been guilty of that in the past myself. And yet what's so important about this is we want you to take a few seconds and write down, we went through a lot of slides and the information. Number one, kind of about the service cycle of buyers and sellers, but we also talked about what's important to sellers and buyers as well. What value do they seek when hiring somebody? And what I'd like you to do is just take 2 to 3 minutes. Clark will bring us back when we're ready, and write down what are some ahas from that? What are some things that you maybe didn't think of, or what did you hear that was new to you that might help you in formulating your value proposition?
That's awesome. Yeah, love that. Come back.
All right, so I hope that you wrote down some good ahas from that section, and just paid attention to some things that maybe we didn't see, or we just saw things differently, right? Like we talked about the example of 96% of people don't care what commission you charge, right? That was just a different way to see it. You can ask all those questions inversely. So today we've covered so far what a value proposition is, why we must have one, why we must be able to express it. We've also covered what buyers and sellers want. We are getting ready to define our value proposition. And so we're going to take, I think, roughly 3 breaks in the next session. But number one, I want to jump into this. So the 3 steps to define your value proposition. And we had talked about this a little early. Number one, identify your knowledge, attitudes, skills, and beliefs that make you qualified to be a great real estate agent. Number 2, transform the value you provide and the value of KW and your market center into benefits for your clients. And number 3, build your value proposition statement. Yeah. So in step 1, let's see, this is on our page 4.29 on the instructor manual, and I think it's the same on yours. Number 1, identify your knowledge, attitudes, skills, and beliefs. So you have a chart, and here's what I want you to break down. Number 1, what knowledge do you bring to this job? We talked about before, what previous experiences do you have? And it said, we talked about it before, I don't have this one, but maybe you have a degree in accounting, don't have that one. Law, don't have that one. Nope, don't have that one either. But anyhow, you might. Or you worked in construction, I did. Or you have great knowledge of homes, home building, I did, codes, etc. Number 2, what attitudes am I bringing to this job? Perhaps you consider yourself caring, confident, articulate, punctual. I'll let you fill in the blank however you are. And what skills do I offer? I can't offer this one, but Clark can. Maybe you're a tech wizard. Maybe you're a marketing. Maybe you have a marketing background or degree. And how does that help them get more of what they want? So you can articulate those. And lastly, what beliefs do I offer? Number 1, equity, integrity, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill out a chart on the participant guide of what those 4 that we bring. So what knowledge, attitudes, skills, and beliefs do I bring that I can incorporate into my value proposition? We're going to write those down. Also take in consideration what was important to sellers and buyers as we read the charts and graphs of the results of the survey from the National Association of Realtors. So let's take 5 minutes to work on that and jot down as many notes as you can and then narrow it down.
Yeah. So I think, Dan, that's a good point. Part of the maybe knee-jerk reaction here was, okay, what did I just learn from NAR and all the things that buyers and sellers want? So don't list those down just yet, right? Look within, we'll get deep here. Look within and fill out this participant guide. Just so you know, it's 4.1, 4.10 for the participant manuals.
Thank you.
Yeah, all good. And so we are, again, you're filling out your attributes, right? Bring your piece in here, kind of take a side step from what you just received, because we'll jump back into that. List down who you are, your attributes in each and every single one of those. So again, thinking about my own experience as an example, right? My knowledge as an educator, right? I mean, yes, I had 2 education degrees, and I went through a certification process as a teacher. I could bring those in there, but what I also could say is it doesn't have to be anything formal in your knowledge, right? Because we could see finance degree in that example and think, well, it might not be any formal. Well, through, again, in my own example, being an educator of being able to mentor and to guide, to walk alongside students, right? It's not dissimilar than what we do for agents. Bring that in there. What is your knowledge, your attitudes, right? What are values that you ascribe to? Committed. What would, and another piece of here, think through, if this is a challenge for you, ask yourself, what would other people say about me in these, right? And if you're coming up with blanks by the end of this, that's okay. Make some notes here. Have others ask you about this, right? What would you say my knowledge is? What would you say my attitudes are? My skills.
That's great. Yeah. What would others say about you? Also, don't diminish anything that you've done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
right? Anything that you've done, keep in mind, we said you are where you are because of a culmination of all the decisions and experiences you've had in your life up to now. And I don't care if you work in the fast food industry and you took the orders, guess what? You're a great communicator, right?
Yep.
You're great at service. You're great at customer service. You meet them where they are. You're prompt, right? So think of that. Now, the challenge I would give you is I would get the creative mindset in place. I'd write down as many as possible. You can come back and narrow that down now, but just write as many. This is about you. Write as many compliments down about yourself. And like I said, bring back all the knowledge, attitude, skills, and beliefs that you bring to this. Okay, great. So I hope you took a lot of notes on your chart and talking about it all about yourself. Now we're going to make a slight transition and we're going to talk about the value prop. We're still speaking of your value proposition, but number two, transform the value you provide or parallel the value you provide and the value of KW and your market center into benefits for the seller or the buyer. So things like this as an example, previously you may have said something along the lines of perhaps you were a teacher before, you were a little league coach before, or you were a first responder, or you worked in the fast food industry, right? Now, that was about you. Now, how does that parallel, how does that lay over the top of your market center? What are the benefits that your market center and Keller Williams as a whole provides? We talked about before. Number one, we have the largest market share of any other single real estate company under one brand in the nation, right? Mm-hmm. I think the number that Mark relayed earlier was 1 out of every 4.67 home sales in the United States involved a Keller Williams agent. That's a thing you might want to know to be able to lay over when talking to home sellers or home buyers. Yeah. Number two, you can utilize the technology conversation. So by having the largest agent base means that we control also the largest technology platform, right? Accessible through the most amount of agents. How does that relay to you? This may be geographically specific at your market center level. And if you're sitting with your market center group, you might talk to your team leader or your productivity coach or your assistant team leader. Go talk to your MCA. Ask your MCA, what's the value proposition that our market center offers that I can extend to home sellers and home buyers? I think you have another chart that you're going to write some notes down, jot some notes down also about what value proposition does being affiliated with Keller Williams add to your personal life experiences.
Yeah. So this one is just the next page, 4.11. And yeah, I'm having two sections. Take your own from step one, right? That knowledge, attitudes, belief. That's on the next page, the top section of step two. You would transfer those down. This is where, again, we get to begin to craft this message. All right, so you'll see an example there, integrity on page 4.11. That an example that belief or that attitude of integrity. Well, how's that a benefit to the client? Honest, dedicated service, and the assurance that you will keep the commitments you make.
Also, you can refer back to the Y4C2Ts.
Mm-hmm.
So how does win-win incorporate in this? How does integrity incorporate in this, right? How do customers always come first? Also, keep in mind the vision of Keller Williams is to be the real estate company of choice for agents and their customers. How does that incorporate into this? These are some great examples. These are KW value propositions that we can add.
Love it. All right. We'll see you back in a bit. This one's 10 minutes.
Yep.
So this is going to be a little bit longer. You get 10 minutes for this one because, again, writing through these, crafting these messages to benefit client, we know it'll take a bit of time. So see you back in 10.
See you back. Okay, welcome back. So we just got done talking about the value proposition of your market center and Keller Williams. And the one before, we were talking about on step one, what value proposition you bring based upon the things internal within yourself that you can portray to this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on another exercise for 6 minutes, very specific in the instructor guide, how long we're going to take on this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our answers from the first chart and our answers from the second chart. What is it that we bring to it? I'll go back and refresh those. Number one, identify what knowledge, attitude, skills, and beliefs do we bring in our value proposition, and how does that relay over or overlay and transform to the value you provide and the value that Keller Williams and your market center provide. So what we're going to do is ask you to start putting those two together. You should have wrote down several for each and start seeing how they align together. You're going to put those together and you're going to work on essentially your first draft of what your value proposition, that by the way, that's Southwest Missouri, your value proposition is by putting those two together. So we're going to break you for 6 minutes. You're going to add those two together and you're going to start working on your value proposition. Okay, welcome back, and thanks for doing that activity. What you started now is, keep in mind, we're not at perfection now, right? What we're at is we're at a first draft. So we're going to break you away again for 5 minutes here shortly. And what we want you to do is share what you've just written with a partner. And if you're by yourself, pick up the phone and call somebody. And you're going to start role playing your proposition to others. Get their feedback, get their thoughts on what they heard. Because remember, what you wrote may not be what they heard. Ask them, what did they hear from this? Was this impactful to them? Did this engage them? Is this thought provoking? Would this help them pick you as one of three, like we shared before? And if not, if you need to pivot shift, we've used that word before a lot. Go refer back to some of the other notes you wrote in chart 1 and chart 2. Take the feedback constructively, because sometimes, like I said, somebody else hearing this may help you write your value proposition in a little bit different way.
Yeah. And this could be such a powerful exercise, yet it's only as much as you show up for the other person that you're giving feedback to. So I'm going to give permission for you to be transparent for that other person, right? Because you don't want to just say, oh, that's great, and think in the back of your mind, like, I wouldn't want to tell that. Say, provide good feedback. Say, hey, I like this part about your value proposition, and here's one thing that I'm a little bit unclear of. Right? How does this relate to how it would benefit me as a buyer or the seller? Right? If you happen again to be by yourself, and yes, maybe you can't call somebody, or at a later point, would love to see how you're crafting your own value proposition in the comments section. So if you're watching this live at a later point, what do you come up with so far for your value proposition? As we're breaking away here, put that in the comments. We'd love to see that. And we're close here, Dan. We're almost at the.
Yep. Stay with us though. We're almost done. We're gonna tie this all together and put a bow on it.
All right. See you back.
Okay. So by now, right, you just finished up the project of working on your value proposition. And obviously, we've defined your value throughout all today, right? So hopefully we put a bow on that. Now, the next section you're working on is just your ahas to achievement, right? So education is great for the sake of education. And yet what we want you to do is really build an action plan from this. When you're done with Ignite as a whole, you should have your playbook, right, for launching you into real estate success further and faster. So each day in Ignite, you grow in how you think, feel, act, and implement what you've learned. So we're going to ask you to write in your participant guide, I think page 4.13, you said, Clark?
Yep, it is.
Okay. So write down your participant guide, how you've grown in each of these areas. And then jot down in the chat if you choose to but let's think about this. How has your thinking changed? What ideas or mindsets are new? Like we talked about a lot of things that people may be thinking differently, specifically when we talked about, the charts and the graphs and National Association. So I get big tongue tie right there. NAR, let's just say NAR. Yeah. How has your thinking changed? What ideas or mindsets are new? Did maybe you see something a little differently? Number 2, what do you feel differently about? Like, are you afraid to just stand up confidently and say who you are and why that value is important to sellers or buyers? And what was meaningful from today? And how will your behaviors be differently going forward? As an example, when people find out, are you in real estate? Typically, the next question they ask is, how's the market? You can say this. And guess what? That's also permission to lead right into your value proposition. This is why it's important for them. Pattern interrupt, make them think differently. And what tools, models, or systems are we used? Clark, we talked about a lot of tools today, didn't we?
Sure did. Yeah, absolutely.
Use those for accountability also?
Yes.
Wow.
Need it.
Okay.
Well, I want to share because I do want to thank you again, Dan, because again, an aha for me, I know what you focus on expands, and oftentimes in this business, and this isn't just in this business, but we've heard the truth that comparison is the thief of joy, right? Or comparison oftentimes puts you at a disadvantage because other people are focusing on their own strengths, right? This whole idea of a value proposition is to focus on what you're good at, how you are good within a great company as Keller Williams, and be able to communicate that and directly connect with the clients. Again, I'm going to thank you, Dan, because that visual of 3 agents standing right beside, I'm in the middle, and we're all talking to Mr. and Mrs. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. And I'm going to stay focused on who I am and telling my value proposition. I'm not going to look to the sides and compare. Right. Because I'm going to take my eye off who I really intend to serve and who I really want to be in a good spot from working with me. So thank you for that powerful image. I'll get it anchored in even more for me. So
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. So as we're wrapping up here, again, you're going to have your daily success system. So this is where, if you're in the market center, this is where business is made. This is where you get to talk with more people to help communicate your value proposition. So in this time, we're going to transfer it over to the market center and go through the role play, the forward conversation, and of course, where it all comes alive and everything does take a flame through and ignite of this daily success system. 10 conversations, 10 contacts out of the database, 10 handwritten notes, and the 10-5-1 social media. So that's all in your participant guide. Will allow you to, again, once join with your peers, lock in arms, and grow your business through the success system. Dan, again, it was an honor. Thank you so much. Guys, we'll meet you for next session 5, when we start getting into lead generation in more detail.
Good luck.